Well, right now it looks like she will. We're hearing she had a meeting with President Trump yesterday for about 2 hours, but as far as we know, no immediate sign that she's going to lose her job. The question, though, is she's become such a lightning rod over the administration's tactics, and you have Democrats saying they want to investigate her, and then if Democrats tie her position to a bid to strip funding from DHS, and then there might be a government shutdown. You've got a president who's going to try to weigh all those factors. For the time being, though, it looks like she's safe.
Nick, to what point is President Trump maybe taking a bigger role here in what's happening in Minnesota, and just maybe the overall ICE strategy in general?
Well, you've seen a couple moves in the last 24 hours that do suggest he's really trying to climb down. So he's moving Gregory Bovino, who's been another real lightning rod in the sort of conflict between protesters and federal agents, out of Minneapolis. He's bringing in Tom Homan, whose approach has been much more focused on criminals. So rather than that sort of broad brush, really aggressive tactics where you've seen federal agents, deploying chemical spray and other things against protesters and doing a much more sweeping roundup of people who were in the U.S. Illegally. So it does feel like he's moderating his position and stepping back a little bit. He also really wants to keep the focus on his agenda on affordability, for example. He's trying to bring that, take that term from the Democrats, and he's headed out to Iowa today to deliver that message. So he does not want this to continue to be such a big issue.
We welcome all of you across the nation. Good morning, good chilly morning. Nick Wadhams from London today, Bloomberg News national security reporter. Good morning on digital YouTube. Paul tells me people just listen on YouTube. I didn't know that.
They listen, they watch,
they tune it in, they listen in the car. Thank you. Good morning on YouTube, Bloomberg podcast. Nick, I want you to talk about, in the old days, there was the military and there was the police and there was a real sharp J. Edgar Hoover demarcation. Are we becoming a nation where we have 28 flavors of military?
It really does feel that way in covering national security. I mean, things that would have been unthinkable even in President Trump's first term are now totally routine. So, for example, you never would have seen what we're now seeing in U.S. cities under Trump's first term. You had this hardline demarcation specifically with National Guard troops. I mean, that was something that just was never done, a third rail that they never would have touched. And you had defense secretaries pushing back against the president and essentially saying, pick me or this decision, because you can't have both. Now you have a Pentagon that is much more willing to see itself as an arm of President Trump's immigration push. You have the Department of Homeland Security willing to go much farther. So it's just a completely different situation than it was before.
With all you know, Nick, and with the resources of Bloomberg News, is ICE trained, particularly with firearms? I mean, I sound like my father, NRA life member. I mean, Nick Wadhams, are they trained with these guns and the ammunition they place within them?
Well, I think what you've really seen is a lot of concern around training for how they deal with people who might have guns or might be in a difficult situation, and how willing they are to use their own weapons. I mean, there have been several cases where you've seen mishandling of firearms by ICE agents, but what you've also seen is a willingness to escalate and a real sort of hair trigger response to protesters, and in a lot of these situations that have, critics would argue have really made it much, much worse. So we do have there has been a lot of reporting around the concerns around their training, but specifically on going into a situation where you would think their goal would be to de-escalate, but what you find is that essentially the ICE agents are escalating that, and that results in the kind of situations we've seen over the last several days.
Nick, do we have any more clarity in cities such as Minneapolis and maybe others as to the relationship between ICE agents and local law enforcement?
Well, there has been, unlike in the past, what we've seen is a real sharp divide there, where local law enforcement in some ways is often taking the side of the protesters or working much more closely with state officials. Minneapolis is a really interesting one, though, because in the last couple of days, you have seen this sort of de-escalation from both sides. The governor, former vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, talking to Trump on the phone, the mayor talking to Trump on the phone, and essentially looking to say, listen, we got to work together. We got to figure out how to de-escalate. Whether that works is another matter.
What about the domino effect the president's team alluded to? If he leaves Minneapolis, does that force him to leave other cities?
You know, that is really one of the things. I mean, you're exactly right. One of the big questions on his mind. I mean, the president who has really staked a lot of his claim with his base on looking tough, and he does retain still a lot of support from his base and their actions in Minneapolis. I think what you'll see, though, is they leave, they look to de-escalate the situation, but he's not going to characterize it that way. They will be able to say in some ways that they've done what they set out to do in Minneapolis, and now they're going to be looking at other cities. But more broadly, I don't think you're going to see this campaign against irregular migrants in U.S. cities back down in any way.